I'm Marcia Kalpas, President of the Pinole Historical Society.
And I'm George Vincent, Vice President of the Pinole Historical Society. This morning we're standing in front of the flower cart, but in October of 1915, Edward M. Downer opened the Bank of Pinole in this building. This building is now on the National Register of Historic Places. This is the central business district of Pinole, and Edward M. Downer was one of those dynamic individuals who helped found many of the businesses of Pinole. He wore many hats. He was station agent of the Southern Pacific, he was postmaster, he was laundry agent, he served on the Pinole Hercules School Board of Trustees, he founded the Pinole Hercules Weekly Times newspaper, and he and his wife Elizabeth also were benefactors of the Pinole Hercules Methodist Church. As a child, my parents would take me in this bank, and I remember the marble floors, I remember the marble drinking fountain, also the palm tree that graced the inside. So this is a street of many memories, and Edward M. Downer was a person who Pinole certainly celebrates his past history.
The month of May is National Preservation Month. It's important for us to remember history, to respect the past, to enjoy the present. It helps us go into the future. We hope that you will enjoy the program that you will be seeing next, as it is a reflection of the past. It's a video made by ex-mayor Betty Boyle as she interviewed some wonderful citizens of Pinole. Enjoy the month of May and help us to preserve future.
I really want to thank all of you for coming to our very first oral history taping. And I will tell you, this is a first for me because even though I sit up on that council seat, I don't usually narrate and try to get people to talk, and I think my problem today may get you to stop talking. But anyway, we really want you to talk about your experiences of growing up Pinole. We're trying to get this for our history, and we hope it will end up in a museum across the street when we move the Faria house. So with that, I'm going to introduce each of you, and if you just kind of raise your hand so everybody knows, or the camera can spot you. We have Celeste and Harold Silvas, and we have Rose Sparacino, and we have Ed Johannessen, and we have Clarence and Stella Faria. And we are very happy you're here. So I'm going to let you kind of chit-chat back and forth together a lot, but I'm also going to try to steer you into some things that I know that happened. I wasn't here, but I know they happened because I've read a lot of the history so far from Harold's book and in some of the things that the county has. So let's talk about your first experiences that you really remember of growing up in Pinole. Go way back, as young as you can be, and what were your first experiences?
Way back
Clarence?
when we were small, and they used to have the cattle drives coming into town from the Pinole Valley, and the cattle would go right across the front lawn into up right on our front porch, and then they would go down to the railroad station. And it was closer to where Rose lived. They had corrals there to load them on the trains, haul them out of town. And they would be 2 a year. One would be in the fall to bring the cattle in from Nevada or wherever, and then also take some of them to the slaughterhouses in Berkeley. Then they would have, in the spring, they would bring a bunch of cattle in, scrawny cattle from Nevada in, and they go out to Castro's ranch way out in the valley, and there was Clay's wife's maiden name? I can't think of it. Remember? Linus Clay.
Linus Clay.
Yeah, but his wife...
Bruner.
Bruner. Oh, Bruner, that's the name I'm looking for. They had a big ranch. In fact, they had so many cattle out in Bruner's ranch that they would have to bring the Mexican cowboys in to round them up in the springtime. To get them back out of there. But anyway, that was one of them. The other thing was the old Club Alibi That was Perry, my great-great-grandfather's bar, where I think they did a little bootlegging. And they had that, like the old cowboy, the old pictures you see on Western film, the front swing gate on the corner would swing open and close to go into the bar. My father would take me in there, and Uncle Perry, my mother's uncle,
Henry.
was always in there. Anyway, what else was that?
That was on what, Fernandez and San Pablo Avenue?
Right.
Right,
on the
yeah.
corner.
Then he was in competition with Harold's uncles.
Oh, what was the competition, Harold?
My uncle had a bar there in right down the corner where the pump house is, and for years. And then he also had next door, he had, I think, the first clothing store in this town.
Yeah.
Haberdashery.
Yeah, haberdashery, they called it in those days.
And if you got drunk enough, you could buy that clothing. You see.
Yeah. And then they had a barber shop next to that, and
The old post
another
office.
building that my uncle owned, and then the post office, and then an ice house down on this corner
I
here.
remember it.
Where the food center
And
was.
getting back to that cattle drive, my uncle used to drive cattle down here. His name was Fred Abbott
Yeah.
from
Way out the
Valley.
valley.
And I rode that a couple of times when I was a kid, because I used to get in his hair. I was only a little guy, and I used to beg him to let me ride, because if you rode a horse through town, you were like King Kong to the rest of the kids.
That's right.
And I couldn't wait for that, but I only rode it a couple of times. But that was, people used to step back into the post office when the cattle came by, and it's hard to visualize, but they actually stopped traffic on the old Highway 40 here, so the cattle could cross and go down.
We had to stop the traffic on Old Highway 40 when Uncle Bill had that old horse and buggy with some hay on it or something.
Yeah, oh, sure.
And got runaway horses, and he had to jump off the wagon and stop the traffic while the horses were going into the cars. Wasn't too many cars on the highway then.
But they stopped the cattle drive about, what, 1945? I think they no more after that.
Yeah, something.
I have
Just-
the date here in my book, but I can't remember.
The council stopped it, right?
Can't
I mean,
find
they,
it right
they
now.
said it wasn't something that should go on or
That's
something.
civilized here.
Well, you people had it easy with the cattle drive, because I lived right in front of where the cattle came in off of the cars. And those people would be shooting, first you'd hear the train come, and then it had a switch to let the car out. And the whistles would blow, and the house would shake. Because we were on mud sills in those days, not on concrete. The people that were going to receive the cattle would be yelling, "Shut the gate down there," So we had a little fun too when the cattle came in.
And your picture shows the train, and where you can even find your house on that
That's
picture that
true.
you've got sitting there that we're going to put.
That was, that's what butcher shop you're talking.
No,
Wait.
they're talking about the cattle chute.
Oh,
Cattle chutes I'm talking about that was down there where they would unload from the cars.
Yeah. Talk about first remembrances. See, these other people, they were born here, but I was a member of a minority group, one of the earliest minority groups in Pinole. Swedish on my mother's side and Norwegian on my father's side.
My.
And so there were about 2 Scandinavians, I think, in town then. But I soon became an honorary Portuguese. This was my neighbor right here, and they all called him brother. He's still my brother after all these years. And his Uncle Bill became my Uncle Bill. So, as I say, I became a member of the Faria family in a way. Always got a lot of free meals up there and attended all the holidays and became a an avid member of the IDES in name only, and
What's the
enjoyed the Holy
IDES?
Ghosts, but parades, and even participated in them. But I came here when I was 5 years old. I was born in San Luis Obispo, and then we moved to Berkeley. Then my dad got a job at Union Oil Company at Oleum, and so at 5 years old was my first remembrance of Pinole, and his sister Marie was about my age, about 10 months younger, I guess, and she immediately became my sister, although I had two at that time. But in those days, mothers dressed their boys with sort of pongee blouses and velvet pants, and I had bobbed hair. And I can still remember his sister bringing me over to his house saying, "Look, Ma, I got a new girl to play with." So that's my first memory of Pinole. I've been trying to convince everybody since that time I am not a girl.
And that's part of that picture you've got of all
this
the...
picture is courtesy of my brother here, Clarence. But it's a classic. It's a classic. We call it the Pinole Little Rascals. And that's my sister Frances there. And I'm about 10 or 11 years old there, so this makes it about 1929 or 30. Yeah, right. Manuel Gallart, who's deceased, and that's their house there. And that's the grammar school trees are up there. And is that Johnny or Ernie?
That's
Johnny, who became the mayor of Pinole, former mayor of Pinole. Worked for Chevron too. Still getting those stock splits today, probably. Yeah. and Clarence, my brother, Clarence Faria, and Ernie Gallart, now
He's deceased.
deceased, and my sister Ella, and Willie Gallart, who's now deceased. And anyway, these are the good old days to say these are the original Pinole Little Rascals. So
it wasn't just Hollywood that had Little Rascals.
Wait, what?
It wasn't just Hollywood had Little Rascals.
No, I think
We had them in Pinole first.
we may not have been as good actors, but we could take them on any day.
Okay. Harold, what do you remember about your first memories of Pinole?
Well, things didn't move very fast, and we had a constable that had his thumb on all of us, and they had an old school up here, right?
The Red
Right
Schoolhouse.
about where the parking lot is.
Yeah.
And it was vacant when I was a kid.
That's right.
And,
Yeah.
Jerry McDonald, who the constable was, used to frown on kids fighting in the street. And if he caught you fighting, you had to go to that vacant school up there. And just Jerry McDonald and the kid that you were fighting with had to go inside, no audience. And then he'd say, "Well, you want to fight? Fight. And I'll tell you when to quit." And win or lose, you had to do your best. And when Jerry McDonald said, "You can quit now," you never got caught fighting again in this town.
And later, that schoolhouse became our local skating rink. Roller skates in those days, not ice skating. Remember, we had great fun in there roller skating, round and around and around the old schoolhouse.
We weren't allowed down across the bridge.
Oh, I was. Yeah, you were much younger.
Yeah.
What's your Celeste? What's your first memories?
Oh, gosh, let's see. Well, I was born in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro, and then I came here when I was 8 months old, and we moved into a house across from the old fire department on, was that Plum Street or Prune Street? Can't remember. Pear Street, I guess.
That's Plum.
Was it Plum? And then Stella was born after that, and then my sister Beatrice was born after Stella. And then we moved to Hercules, and my father was killed in an explosion there in 1929. We moved there in 1926, I guess. And then we went to school. There was the Hercules Park had a where all the children went to kindergarten at that time. And then after that, they went to the old school on the hill. But before that, it was a park. And we lived in the village there. And after my father died, then we came to live in Pinole on Quinnen Street and stayed there until, then I grew up in Pinole from then on.
I never knew you were foreign born. Learned something today.
Stella?
Yeah.
Well, so I'll take it from where Celeste left off. The kindergarten building in Hercules is now St. Joseph's Parish Hall. They moved it down. It was in the Triangle Park in Hercules. And so we came after my father was killed. My mother was widowed, and we were allowed to stay in the Hercules Village House for a short time and then moved down to Quinnen Street. And it was a wonderful neighborhood. Sterling Kelly, Armand Mariero, the Mannings, we were just like one big family. Got together in the evening after dinner under the street light and played games. And,
Singing songs.
yeah, just it
Played
was
kick
really,
the can.
yeah, played games. And I remember one of my first memories as a child was picking poppies up on Fernandez Hill, where we live now. And we used to come down to Highway 40 and set up a little stand, not knowing that it was illegal to pick California poppies, but we were just little kids, and people stopped and bought poppies from us all the time.
Oh, I used to stand out on Highway 40. I had lupins in one hand, poppies in the other. The only way I made any money in those days, because his uncle never paid me anything for all the work I did. You know?
You got free milk.
I got free milk, right.
But we did, the kids in the neighborhood we didn't feel poor. We
No.
didn't have anything. We had an empty lot next to our house, and everyone had vegetable gardens, and we managed. Dr. Fernandez was the local doctor who delivered us and took care of us when we were sick, and he just had to hear. I don't even know that he needed a phone call, and he would drive up and come to the house. And my mother was a wonderful cook, and he'd come into the house and always check to see what she had cooking on the stove, lift the lids off the pots, and was a really amazing little man.
You talk about Dr. Fernandez. One time we were having a roundup. I don't know if you were there at the Faria Ranch and the Yellow Horse Ranch. But every year we'd have a roundup in the spring, and after the roundup was over and the branding and the cutting was over, we'd have a little rodeo of our own, you know. And one time I was riding a steer, and my head went down as the steer's horn came up and almost poked out my eye, but broke a tooth and went right through here. This was Easter Sunday, and I can still remember Bill bringing me down the street, passing the Catholic Church. Just as church let out, Doc Fernandez was already in the office, and here I am covered with blood and manure on Easter Sunday, passing the Catholic Church, everybody else in their Sunday finest.
That was quite an Easter parade. Well, Stella and Celeste, your mother actually raised, what, four of you?
Four girls.
Four girls.
And I should add that we have a real connection to Rose Sparacino. Her mother was the Good Samaritan of the day. She just looked out for a lot of people. There were a lot of immigrants in those days, and my mother didn't speak English, and Rose's mother just looked out for us like we were her own. She helped my mother immensely. We could never,
I don't know what we would
ever
have done without her.
say enough.
Rose.
And Mrs. Enos had the reputation of always being there for people in need. She just was a wonderful lady.
And then let's not neglect Rose's dad, the greatest auctioneer in the history of Pinole for the Holy Ghost celebrations.
That was a big occasion in our town. Even if you weren't Portuguese, everybody came because they loved the sopas and they loved the chamaritas that we used to have, the dance, which was the old-fashioned country style. Getting back to my mother, as Stella related, my mother was a very caring person. She was like when people had babies, Dr. Fernandez would say, go down and see Stella when you're ready, and she'll come and help us out. And sure enough, the man would knock on the side of the house. I remember that so well. And up she would go, and they'd go out and deliver the McAndrews kids She helped deliver Stella with Dr. Fernandez, and she'd get there early and have the water ready and have the clothes and all that sort of. I like a midwife, let's put it that way. Another thing she did is with the Fernandez, especially with the doctor's wife, she would ask for a donation, and there was, as Stella said, lots of immigrants, and especially Filipinos working out on the farms out. The Lopez Ranch was one, for instance, which is way out. And she would take, Mrs. Fernandez would say, Stella, you go to Louis Roof, buy what you need, and take it. And she would do that a lot. And I don't know what was about her. We had a little Mexican group, and they lived across the tracks from us. They lost their mother, Anna, which went to school with us at an early age and left, I think 4 or 5, I don't think 6, but at least 5 kids. And she took care of them. By that I mean she went to the county and got them aid. The father worked for the SP on the tracks, but it was that kind of thing that she did and enjoyed so much. And that was a lot of our life as well, sharing. We had, where we lived down there by ourselves, yet we could see other houses around. We had cows, pigs, chickens, rabbits, you name it, ducks, you name it. And we would share. If we had lots of butter, she made butter at home, we'd take it and somebody else would give you something else. And especially the milk for the kids, the Mexican children. She shared a lot with them. And they were appreciative as they grew older. They certainly showed it. So that was a lot of memories in my days. And talking about Old Town Pinole, I remember with Ruth Barrett Moses running all over these hills. I'd hate to tell you what we did sometimes.
Go ahead.
Jeremy, if my kids did it today, I'd die. There's a big tank up on top of the hill in back of, that's submerged in and had a stairway going down. Well, Ruth and Moses and I was playing down there. When I think of it now, if that staircase ever gave in, nobody would ever find us, That's the type of thing you did.
The rattlesnakes down there would take care of you.
Pardon me?
The rattlesnakes down there would take care of you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
we were told never to go up there, too. We were told never to go up there.
Yeah, that's
Is
true.
that the reservoir that's up
The reservoir, yeah.
on the hill by the
We
freeway?
had a raft in there when I was a kid.
Oh, my.
We weren't allowed to go
And
up
you
there.
played on the raft
Yeah.
with the water that was still
Right.
visible. So,
Stagnant water.
Harold, when did you get your first accordion?
Oh, gosh, that was wonderful.
My first piano accordion was when I was 6 years old. And you may not believe this, but in those days, I used to practice on the front porch
Yes, sirree.
outside. And
Play
he
for
lived right
hours.
across the street.
I had a guitar, remember?
Yeah. And I'd play by the hour out
Hours.
there, and people would come down the street, hey, play this, okay. And they'd all wait till I got through with that, and then they'd move on.
Yeah.
And I used to play by the hour out there.
Well, we were born too soon. We could have been stars if all of that happened today.
That's true.
It was beautiful. It was beautiful what we played. It was lovely.
And I mentioned, the Silvases, they lived where the Catholic Church, parking lot is now. I never thought, I lived right across the street from them later after we moved from the valley to the high rent district in town, in the old town. And anyway, I never thought I'd live to see the day when the Silvases property would become sacred ground.
Well, you took your accordion with you when you were in the war, right?
Right.
And you entertained while you weren't busy in the war, right?
Was that
Yeah.
called, that group?
I,
Yanks a Million or something?
after the war was over, I got with special service outfit in Europe. And was a Yanks a Million road show. And we were rated next to Glenn Miller in the European Theater.
Did they
I'll
record
be
you?
down.
We had a 21-piece band
Wow.
and all kinds of big name acts. And all of these people were big stars, most of them. Like the people in the band all came from like Artie Shaw, Benny Goodman, and all of that. And
Ever have Bob Hope there?
yeah, no,
No?
not with us. He was with the USO. But this was the Army entertainment. And we'd fly like from Paris to Rome and then back again. And we'd go by bus from there to Belgium, or Paris was our headquarters. It was a great experience.
And then you played around this area after you come home, right?
All over.
He played around.
He played his accordion.
Played all over San Francisco. Played the Golden Gate Theater.
Ray Bolger.
I played 7 years at Diablo Country Club and a year at the Hearst Ranch. So I played all over, mostly dance, hotel music.
You know, Harold mentioned World War II. One story I'd like to tell. I know this is getting into more modern times than,
That's
than
all right.
in
It's
the
part
beginning.
of your life.
This is just a 1 in a trillion shot. The war is over, and my ship docked in New York area, and I boarded a train. In those days, wasn't much flying, and coming home just like in a cattle car, and you'd leave the windows open to get some air, and you wake up in the morning and you'd be blackface. Anyway, here I am on this train coming home, end of World War II, and who do I meet on the train? Clarence Marcus. Now, how's that about 1 in, 10 million a shot, I guess? 2 Pinole boys meeting on a train in New York coming home from World War II.
He met,
Clarence and Harold,
what's it
didn't you
called?
meet someplace when you were in the service?
Harold met,
Yeah, in Florida.
what Gallart was
Yeah.
it you met?
But he got me in trouble. He tells, he say he's throwing the food out like this on KP, and then he writes home and says, Clarence must have done something awful wrong. He's on KP all the time. 'Cause not only in Florida, just before I went to Europe, in Texas, Camp Housey, same thing again.
Yeah.
Harold and all those same guys. I got in trouble. So he tells Stella that I must have been a bad boy.
And then in Belgium, I was in Belgium carrying my barracks bag up into a barn so we could sleep. And I ran into Paul Gallart. And in Belgium, they have barns that have cement floors, and they store hay in them. And they have several floors, and we had to climb up ladders to get off at different floors so the set amount of soldiers could sleep in there. And I was climbing past this one level, and barracks bag was staring me in the face and it says Paul Gallart, and I thought it couldn't be the guy I know. So I came back down, and there was a big crap game going on that floor, and Paul Gallart had all the money.
Well, after the war, you all came back and started a new life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Started your families, got married. Want to tell me a little bit about
We
that?
got married while he was still in the
Oh,
service.
that's right, you were-
Came home.
Well,
on
you
a-
know, when Pinoleans get married, most of them stay married.
Yeah.
Now, you two been married how long now?
57 years
Yeah.
in September.
61.
62?
Yeah.
Goodness.
No, it'll be
Huh?
62.
I was 62.
Yeah.
I just lost my husband a year and a half ago, but I was 62 as
And
well.
my wife and I are 61 this year, so
Well, that's,
our marriage is last year.
you got married during the war, though. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
1943.
We did too.
And you were on furlough.
He came home on a furlough, and we got married
They
then.
had cut my toes off in the service, and it was a recuperation furlough. And couldn't hobble too fast, so we got married.
Yeah. Oh,
In
yeah.
other words, Celeste, you caught him, right?
Yeah.
So, let's talk a little bit about your families.
Let's see, our parents were born in Portugal, and then went to Brazil. And they owned it would be like a grocery store, I guess, there. And then one of a cousin of my mother's was working at the Hercules Powder Company, and wrote to them and told them that they should come to America, that, things would be better here. So they did, and we came through Ellis Island, and then came by train to Pinole. And that's when we lived in the little house across from the fire department. And then, let's see, after that, then our father was killed
In 29.
in 29. Let's see, what else? I'm trying to think from then on.
Want to add anything, Stella?
Well, the little house that I was born in is the house right behind Dutra's house on the corner of, that's Plum, isn't it? No, that's Prune Street. And so we went to Hercules as really very small children. I vaguely remember things happening there, remember our neighbors, and remember a lady named Mrs. Cullen who always baked a lot, and she always treated the children. You could smell the cookies baking throughout the neighborhood, and she always invited us to have a cookie. And then when we came down to Quinnen Street, that would have been the early 30s, and we all went to the old school up on the hill. We walked up the hill, ran home at lunchtime, had lunch at home every day, except in the wintertime. If it was really stormy and cold, we took a lunch, and the kids all ate on the concrete floor in the basement of the school. And the big furnace was down there, so it was always warm down in that area. And we played jacks, and I remember running home, because in those days there were like the soap operas now, Stella Dallas and other
Amos and Andy.
And that came on. We'd run home, be sure to get there so that we didn't miss the next episode, and you could miss it for, I'm sure, like the soap operas now, you could miss it for a couple of weeks and it'd still be in the same spot.
And that was listening on the radio, right?
Listened on the radio. No TV in those days. And then we didn't have a high school here, so beginning in the 9th grade, we had graduation from grammar school, went to Roosevelt Junior High by bus down on 9th and Bissell, is that? Mm-hmm. And then went to Richmond High, still by bus. And the Pinole kids always seemed to get the early schedule. We'd have to be sometimes over there on the bridge where it crosses the creek at even before 7 in the morning.
Around 7 in the morning, we'd get the bus to Richmond. The bus driver would wait sometimes because he knew exactly who was coming. We'd be running down the street.
And then during the war, we worked at the shipyards. I did, Celeste did.
You were part of the Rosie the Riveters, right?
Yes, we did the Rosie the Riveter interview for oral history department at UC Berkeley. Celeste and I both did. And then Clarence and I got married in 47 and moved into one of the houses that Mrs. Kelly owned, right on the across from the Pythian Hall there. And right where about they're talking about moving the Faria house. We lived in that little house on the highway. And it was Highway 40 then, no freeway, so there were accidents all the time.
Cars on our porch all the time. And in our basement one time.
One actually came through the house. And then we built our home up on Summit Drive and stayed there until we moved up to Folsom 7 years ago. So it's a long time in Pinole.
Did you move to Folsom to be closer to your relatives at the prison there?
Yes, Ed.
Why did you leave Pinole?
Well, we moved into the place we were up there. It's like a little prison. It's got a big wall around it, and you got to have a gate to get in and out. You have a special pass. get in the gate and go out.
But we still have our home here on Summit Drive. Our son Alan lives there, and so we're here quite often.
And that's really why you're down here today.
Yeah, we miss. Yeah, we're here to see a granddaughter.
Visit the family.
Visit
yeah,
our granddaughter.
But Pinole was a pretty safe place when you guys grew up.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sure.
I mean, did people even lock their doors?
Never.
No, we never had a key.
We didn't
We never
have
had a key.
No,
Nobody had keys.
I think there were only 900 people in this town when I left to go into service,
Yeah.
and that was in 43.
Yeah, in 39, we had 781. I still remember that number.
Yeah.
Yeah, 781 in 1939, or could have been 38. Yeah.
Then we had the Opera House and the old theater. Well, he played at the Opera House when he was younger.
Oh, tell us a little bit about the Opera House, because when I tell people that I wasn't here, but I say, they had an opera house, and people think I'm, where'd you hear that,
They had
Betty, in
meetings
Wyoming?
upstairs, and they had shows, and they had, I think the first library was in a little corner room in the Opera House.
Well,
And then
they
I
used to have a minstrel show. I think
Yeah.
I think we saw the last of the minstrel shows. Mr. Locketer, all blackface, and they were great shows. But they faded out shortly after that. I think
That was put
saw the
on
last
by a school teacher. She was a Vinson, wasn't she? Yeah,
Emily Vincent.
Emily Vinson, and she was
Oh,
a
yeah.
7th grade school teacher, and she was a real good at it. And that was a big drawing card in our days, And funny, those funny jokes about the different people in the town. I wanted to say about coming here
That's a
early. My
show.
family came from Massachusetts, and my dad had a brother out here who lived where and back where Henrietta Enos lived, still in that house. And my dad came out here first and got a job at the plant. And my mother finally came out here, and she didn't know where she was coming in those days. That was 1918. I was born out here. That was during the flu epidemic time as well, just about ending. And I was taken by the supervisor, which was Mr. Silvas, to Martinez, where I was born in the county hospital. And then we came back, and they moved from there after I came, and where your bank is today, the Mechanics Bank, it was Louise Oliver, an old 2-story
Well, I
home.
remember her.
Yeah. And she was Mary and Louise, all I remember. And she was a school teacher in San Pablo. Never married, either one of them, and they lived in the basement there. Finally, we moved up in back, I was saying, in the back of this house here, in the back here on the cliff, there was old houses. I have a picture of it, that I guess it was the Fernandezes that had it in those days. You can see the plumbing on the outside and everything.
Yeah.
And we lived up there until after the war, which was World War I. And then my folks went to Livingston, and we had a farm out there for a short time. And it didn't work out. So we came back, and we lived in the village. And I, too, went to the kindergarten in that building that Stella referred to in Hercules, in the park there. They had this lovely meeting place, and we had kindergarten there. And at that time, when I came back, I was just 4 or 5, and I couldn't speak a word English. I only knew Portuguese. And so when I would come back, I would say, the teacher, in Portuguese, I can't say it now, but I would say, the teacher says, "Kiri, kiri," and I didn't understand what she was talking about. My mother would say, "That was a cat. That was a cat." And she'd explain to me what it was all about. And that's where I started. From there, we moved to this house, as I showed you, down by the tracks, and we lived there 35 years before I finally moved to Pleasant Hill in 1960. I was married from the old house in 1940, and we moved in 1960. So that's lots of Pinole history there.
I didn't know how to speak English until, well, we started school, and I think, not Frances Ellahorst, Alice.
Alice.
She taught us to speak English. Well, we didn't know any different. We just started school, and I don't know, we were speaking English all of a sudden. No problem. I don't know what the problem was. In fact, my sister Arlette was in first grade for a while and then was moved to the second grade. You know, so we really learned fast. We didn't have any teachers who taught.
They were bilingual teachers with no language background.
Yeah.
Not like today,
Getting
right?
back to the Olivers, they were school teachers. One was in San Pablo.
Louise.
Yeah.
As a principal.
And
Was Mary a school teacher as well?
I
And that
mean,
little
they were
black hat
sorta-
she used to
they
wear?
were very strange. They never had electricity.
I was going
remember?
to say, they're the last people in Pinole to have electric
It
lights.
was like a haunted house. One used to play the piano,
Oh, she was.
and she would wail at night, and you'd go by there, and you'd hear these
Spooky.
weird sounds, and no electricity, no
That's
lights
right.
on at all.
Coal lamps.
And I remember as a kid, if your ball bounced into their yard, it was gone. You could never get it back.
Well, some of the things I'm sure, at least you guys did, was how about swimming in the Pinole Creek?
Oh,
Did you ever go swimming in Pinole
yeah.
Creek?
He used to swim in
Oh.
Pinole Creek all the time.
Swam in the creek because
Yeah, at the second dam.
Yeah.
Second dam, first dam and second dam.
yeah, that's where Ernie Gillard put his head open, remember?
Yeah.
But when you walked the creek and you found out what's in that creek, you wouldn't even go near the creek anymore. But all the farmhouses had their outhouses built over the top of the creek, and you just drop down, and it all rode. When you had the heavy rains, the roads got it all.
Oh, yeah. No,
The most famous swimming hole was the one on Joe Silva's ranch, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that was called Second Dam for some reason. I don't know why.
Well, the first one was right here at the, let's see, if you go out just where the creek goes towards the hill and makes the turn right over there.
That was first?
That's the first one. Then you go, the second one was where Ernie was, I think.
Didn't you folks go and get pollywogs? I remember getting pollywogs
Pinole.
right
I
downtown.
didn't have to
here.
go in the creek. You just go across the street from my house.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same here.
Yeah, I'd get pollywogs, put them in the jars, you know.
Watch them grow into
Wow,
frogs.
yeah.
That's how we learned about the birds and the bees and all those things.
And then the creek used to flood a lot.
Oh, yes,
that
tell me
It was
about it.
there was a pretty bad flood.
Yeah,
A couple of them.
Was it 48?
because my mother lived where the church parking lot, Catholic church parking lot is, and I know we had to come down and get her out and carry her out of the house.
Fire
because-
department came and pulled up along the fence, and we got her out of the house.
We not only swam there, we went boating there. His brother was a master of all trades. And he built a boat out of barrel staves or something and put asphalt or tar in the cracks, you know. And we went boating. I think we lasted about 10 minutes, sank to the bottom. But that was in springtime when the creek was full. Boating and swimming.
So, and there were baseball games.
The what?
Didn't you all
Baseball.
play baseball?
Oh, yes.
On the
Across
what's
Joe Trot's, in
yeah,
Joe Trot's.
they called him Joe Trot. His name was Joe
Oh,
Silva.
we used to play and where Francis Collins built his
school.
house. Yeah, a vacant lot then.
Yeah, we didn't have any good fields except Hercules had a good
Yeah.
ball field.
Yeah, that was a
And
good one. Yeah.
When you developed into a pretty good player, you could get
Graduate to that, yeah.
a place up there.
Yeah, they even had a grandstand, and so that lots of Sundays, that was a big deal to go up there and watch the games.
I played for Three Brothers Service.
Oh, you
that
did?
was a big team, yeah.
Yeah.
And then we'd go
And Mike Lewis, Joe Costa,
Yeah.
all played there. Louis Francis.
Yeah.
How'd they have time to do that? We didn't have time, you know. All the spare time we're milking cows and doing all that other
We
stuff.
worked it in.
Yeah, we didn't have time.
He was
to play.
my protege, so if I had to play baseball, I'd delegate to him. See?
And he'd get me up in the morning and he'd say, tie a string around. He said, we're going to go up to the ranch early tomorrow morning to go milk the cows, and I'll wake you up. Just tie a string around your wrist and put it out the window, and I'll wake you up. And he pulled me, and I'm out of bed, and I'm hanging out the window.
I used to have to tie a rope or a string around his leg to wake him up because he's right next door. See? He's a willing student.
A willing student.
I made him what he is today.
Anyway.
Hey, we talked about outhouses a little while ago, and that's an important part of Pinole history, I think. Those of us
gosh.
who lived in the outskirts, you know, we helped each other dig the holes for the outhouse.
Oh, my.
Now, my family was relatively small, only 5, so we had a 2-holer, and they were a little larger, maybe 2 or 3, but the Gallarts, they had about 10 kids there one time, and they had about a 6-holer. So they always got the best of the deal. You know, the holes, all the neighbors chipped in and helped each other dig the holes. So we always had to work harder for the Gallarts than they worked for us, you see, because we had to dig a monstrous hole for them.
Oh, God.
Well, they had one in their yard, too, when you
Yeah,
were
many
little.
years ago.
Oh, and did you people in town, you didn't have outhouses in town, did you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
And
they
then we
did.
had water tanks, too.
Yeah, I remember the water.
And
They used to
cesspools. I
catch
remember the cesspools.
Rainwater for all the women wash their hair with it. Remember?
Well, you had sewers before we did. Out
Oh,
in the
yeah.
valley. Yeah.
You know,
They
the
were upper class.
WPA came in and put the sewers in. So we had our sewer. Remember that?
Yeah, I don't remember that.
Yeah. I remember going out there, everybody's all pushed because President Roosevelt took office and he's finding jobs for everybody. And they started the WPA, and they're the ones who started the sewer line to get rid of the sewage going to the bay. And they came out to the, all the way out, went out as far as the entrance to the ranch. you
Yeah,
know.
to the
That's
ranch.
where it ended. So Bill still had raw sewage going in to that little spot there. Then they eventually were forced to put a new sewer line.
He had the stream running right under the outhouse.
That's where he planted all the tomatoes.
My father built all those wooden bridges out the valley.
It was a stream running under
Yeah.
He worked for the county at that time, and he would build all these wooden bridges, and you remember that?
Oh, sure, yeah.
And then going up Appian Way, they made the road wider, and my dad put the first concrete wall up there. I don't know what.
Yeah.
Whether that was a WPA project or what, but my dad was a carpenter and a contractor.
Was Squeaker related to you?
No.
Right?
No.
Because he was the boss of the roads. We called him
Yeah.
Squeaker
Supervisor.
was the boss of the roads. I never knew his real name.
Squeaker, that's all they called him.
He had a high-pitched voice, too.
And then
Silva, not Silvas. Silva
who was,
without the A. Yes, I mean,
the head of Pinole Light and Power Company.
That's-
Ed
Oh,
Hoke.
that was the Downers.
No,
Hoke.
They called
Ed
him
Hoke.
Oh, Ed Hoke.
You know
Yeah.
that when they built that Appian Way, the highway, the street, I mean, whatever you call it, going up there, that's when it divided Grandpa Rose's ranch. 13 acres of land wound up on the other side of the road. Well, it was cheaper just to don't say nothing and forget about it. When the Roses all died, the land went to Fitzgerald, wound up with it, and that's where the shopping center is.
Ah, big-
Now, the land on this side, you call it the north side or the east side, that was Grandpa Rose's ranch. There's nothing in this city that says Rose had a ranch here.
Huh, he's a chef.
And I can't believe that went by. No streets, nothing. Grandpa Rose then my mother was born out there on the ranch where the high school is. That was the Cole Ranch, remember? Dr.
Yeah.
Fernandez's sisters owned.
Didn't Ramus live out there?
And my
too?
mother, right when she'd
No,
go to
Ramus on the other side.
Ramus came there after.
Later.
When Grandpa Rose first came here, he went there. My father and the Farias all came from San Pablo, and they lived over there in a little shack where Joe Trott's dairy was.
Cecilini's.
There was a little. I think part of the building. Well, I think it was still there. I told Dr. Mariotti where it was, which was part of that was part of the Faria house.
They took it down for that parking lot.
Grandpa Rose told Grandma Faria one because he bought the ranch was back in the hole there next to the Appian, and he told Grandma Faria that he was going to buy the ranch, not buy that one. He was going to buy where the Faria house is. The next day, Grandma Faria bought the ranch from under him. So, and my father and they were living in right there where Joe Trott's. They came from San Pablo to there. And my mother was born out at the Cole Ranch. And when she'd go to school, she horse and buggies. And then tie the eucalyptus trees up in the schoolhouse. She helped plant those trees, the old schoolhouse. And I remember my mother tells me stories about Buster Hughes, Playboy Buster. Gordon, you guys knew old Gordon, his son, so you're just like his father. Anyway, see, but the Perrys was my mother's grandparents, and they lived in the house where Francis Collins' house is now, but it burned down when I was little. Uncle Molly was the butcher, and that was, we talked about earlier, and that butcher shop was located, if you go over to the Square Deal Garage and you look into the office there, you look at the wall there and look at the picture of the butcher shop, that's where they hung the beef to cure it and so on. Then Uncle Molly went out of business when Ted Hellman started the butcher shop where the old shoe shop is, and they...
It's not there anymore either.
Then
no, it's not there anymore.
No, some things have gone.
Fraser had a grocery store, didn't he? And then Fraser and Roy didn't.
Yeah.
And that was just past.
Yeah.
Then Molly bought a bar in Albany called a Forum Club, wasn't it? Or out?
No, he worked for...
He just worked for someone there.
He worked for...
I know he is in the bar business.
Yeah, well, they did that when he had the alibi.
We had a lot of
Well,
bars.
it wasn't the alibi, I don't know.
Bars
It
in
was
Pinole
called
when we were little.
Perry's
I
Saloon.
should say they did.
And wasn't there a Walton over here by the Wilkes Garage that had some kind of a...
Corral. That Walton's was...
it was
Walton
like
had
a
feed-
cafe
It
or
was a
something.
feed-
Feed and fuel, it was
Yeah.
a livery.
Yeah, that burned down too. That was over where the Eagles Hall is.
And the Vassals had an ice cream store.
Yeah, called the
That's a club alibi.
Yeah, it's a real old-fashioned ice
Palace
cream
of
store with
Sweets.
a wrought iron, Yeah. What was it called?
Palace of Sweets.
Was that it?
Yeah.
Well, going back to talking about the Palace of Sweets, where let's see, across from the Lungies, on the other corner, used to be the Kokori's building. And they were Greek people. Well, that's where the
Yeah.
Vassals came in.
Yeah.
And it was a treat to go in there and get ice cream.
Yeah.
For me, because I had to walk down Tenet Avenue all the way down to SP Depot, and I walked to school every day and came home every day. I was lucky once in a while. I'd get a ride with Mr. Fernandez. Tom would go pick up his children, which was Bud and Anita, and I'd get a ride, but not all the time. So it was a treat for me to stop at the Kokori's building, and she went to school with us, and have a treat. So that's going back a little ways, too.
But you didn't have any sidewalks going down that
No,
way. There were
it was
no
all-
sidewalks going down to
No,
the
it was
depot.
boards.
It was all boards.
Yeah.
All boards.
Wooden boards.
And that's where the Pinole Times was printed down.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mr.
Right down
Ebsen.
at-
down
Yeah.
Epson, yeah.
Ebsen's, yes.
They used to have to go down to get their mail, go down by horse and buggy and pick up the mail down there. They
Yeah.
had the mail down there and the newspaper, and the bank was down there first. And then the bank moved.
When I came home on my first furlough from the service, had my duffel bag on, she talked about the boardwalk. Get off at the Southern Pacific Station down there and walking, and it was dark. and I think, God, I'm not making all this noise. Somebody must be following me, and I was getting a little shaky.
Now, I used to enjoy our Pinole theater, movie theater.
Oh, that's
It used to
right.
cost a
Yeah.
dime to get in, and I can still remember the first talking picture my mother took me. I think it was Al Jolson, huh? Al Jolson, first talking picture?
One of them.
Might have
You're all
been.
too young to remember that?
Oh, no.
Anyway,
Well,
he made the first
my
one.
mother took me to the...
I never
can
had
always
the time to get in there.
the first talking picture. My mother and I saw that, and I remember we saw another one on I guess it was about Frankenstein. The only two shows I can remember.
used to
There's
run
theater.
the-
little ramp going up
Run
and
the,
the
There
marquee.
was a little julep.
10 cents for kids. I don't know what it was for adults.
There was a
Oh,
little
yeah,
jewelry
Chester
projector.
Clark.
Did you clean it?
A little
Did you
jewelry
sweep it up?
store.
Yeah.
No, I never.
Yeah, who owned
Where'd you
that
get those
jewelry
cigarettes
store?
that
Do
we
you
used to
remember?
get?
Oh, it
I just
changed
stood
hands
off
so
the
many
truck.
times.
All the truck drivers had cigarettes.
One guy, but I can't
I used to they never missed a pack.
Just says watch, clock, and jewelry repairs, and it
Yeah.
was right next to the old theater.
Oh, that's a nice
He played
picture.
there too for some of the shows.
Yeah, the jazz singer.
I have
That
one
was
of
it. The jazz
programs.
singer. Yeah.
I think we should mention something about when we were growing up, having gone to the old school on the hill, because we had wonderful teachers. There are schools named after them, the Collins School, the Yellow Horse School, the Murphy. And they were
Elizabeth
all,
Stewart.
we all had them
Yeah, and beavers.
as teachers. And I remember that the students who were, good students helped the ones who were struggling. And we had, there were a few in my class, and they would be held back, but only to a point, and then they'd move them on, and the next year another group would take them on, and we had kids who were pretty retarded and slow, and we'd work with them. We'd get our work done, and the teachers expected us to help the ones that needed help, and they just graduated along with the other kids. It was wonderful that they went that extra mile to make sure that those kids got through at least grammar school. And
Talking about that school, when we went to Roosevelt, the ninth grade, or even to high school, mostly to Roosevelt, we had a big reputation if we came from Pinole. We knew our work. They made sure that. Another thing that always stood out in my mind on Halloween, do you remember how we all used to dress up and come downtown and sing down where the Shell station used to be? And then we used to go over and see Grandma O'Neill, which that's where Anita McDonald comes in, and she lived in back, and her Grandma O'Neill would be in the window in her wheelchair, and we'd all sing, and then we'd wave to her, and that was a big treat to do that in those days. Coming down, everybody was laughing and talking, and the teachers were with us. The town would gather around to hear us sing and so forth.
Yeah, I have to agree. We had great teachers. I mean, they were all dedicated, and all through my life after leaving Pinole, I never felt, even coming from a small town in my day, 781, no matter what school or college I went to, I never felt that I had any regrets or couldn't keep up with people who went to private schools even. Always, and they gave us such a firm grounding.
Yeah.
Never had to apologize anywhere because I came from a small town and we had poor teachers. Great teachers. You never forgot. I remember almost, every room what the specialty was and what we did. And I wrote a book once. It became a textbook on and I was telling you about this, on the labor movement in Hawaii, which I got interested in during the war. And the book, it became not a bestseller, but it became a textbook in Hawaii because nobody else has ever written on the subject. So anyway, I sent a copy of the book to Miss Alice, who was our first grade teacher. And my dedication was, see what you started. And she wrote me, I still have the letter. If you ever want it for Pinole Archives, I'll get it. She wrote me the nicest letter thanking me for the book.
Yeah. That would be great to have that for the archives.
Yeah.
Like Jerry McDonald, the constable of this town, he was a great guy. He taught the kids a lot.
Yes, all right.
And he got killed in a bank hold up in Rodeo.
Rodeo, yeah.
And a lot of people never heard of the man, but he was a great, great guy.
That was back in the days of the Dillingers, and bank robberies were quite common. And he rushed the guy with a gun and got shot and killed.
And he stood for the
law
right way to live, law and order, and he really lived it to the end. He was a great, great man.
Getting back to our school, even not too long ago, my son was working with his youngest son, and he was saying, I remember at school how our teacher in the 4th grade used to drill us every morning on the times table. He says, these kids don't even know the times table these days.
I know. She put the number in the middle, and then the spokes would go out to the numbers, and your turn would come around the room, and you better have the answer.
Right on.
And then wrapped over the knuckles for writing.
Well, you were 4th grade. You know how it is.
When I first started school, I was started writing left-handed, and Miss Alice come in with a little bamboo stick, cross the knuckles, so then switch, and then as soon as you leave, I'll go back because I couldn't hold a pencil in this hand. But I learned to write right.
Oh, God.
Like that, you had it right. Yeah, it happened.
And
all
hold
fingers.
up that little finger, don't forget. And it had to be easy.
Yeah.
When I
Make
see
those
these
circles.
kids writing like this, I
How many
cringe.
of us still write that way, huh?
Oh,
No one
God.
knows.
And then Mrs. Jordan had 2 classes in her room.
Yeah, I remember.
6 and
5th and
7.
6th, wasn't
No,
it?
6th and 7th.
6 and 7.
6th and 7th,
yeah.
yeah.
You had your brother's artwork up on the wall.
Yeah.
Norbert and Swede, boy, they were her pets. They were up front, and she was on them all the time.
That's why he made
And we're
good
always
with Chuck.
horsing around,
Oh, you're telling me, Norbert and Swede. I was in the 6th grade, and I was in the 7th. They were in the 6th. Man, she sure liked those 2 kids.
Well, she liked us too much. She watched us very carefully.
Well, would you like to tell me about your own children and grandchildren? I guess you have.
Any great-grandchildren?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Nobody yet?
No.
I'm on the verge, but...
On the verge, but not a grandchildren. How many
Great-grandchildren, Ed?
I got 2 grandchildren, no great-grandchildren yet. But one of them got married a year ago, and they're very much in love, and I have high hopes.
That's good. That's good.
We have 3 children. Chrissy is the oldest, and she's a nurse practitioner. Cindy is the next one, Cynthia, and she's been at Chevron for 30-some-odd years, 36 years now, I think. And then we have Edward, who works for the Orinda School District, and he lives in Vallejo. And, Chrissy has 2 children. Michael is 32, and Kathy is 30. And Edward has 2 children. The oldest is 22, and the youngest is 18. And we don't have any grandchildren, or great-grandchildren, I should say.
I have, 2 children. Edward is 55 this year. He married a girl from New Jersey, and they have age 55 as well. They were both teachers, and I would say my son couldn't stand the kids. He'd come home and tell me, Mom, He says, I would no more talk to the teachers than some of those kids. I can't take it. So anyway, to make a long story short, he went into business for himself and is doing exceedingly well. They have 2 boys, Paul 16, and Christopher is 20 this month, and he's attending the University of Tucson, Arizona. Then Rosemary is 50, well, she's 2 years younger, so she's 53. She works for, and has worked ever since, for Kaiser in Walnut Creek as a liaison for the employees and the hospital. She has a very interesting job, and she has 2 boys. The oldest one is Colin, and Colin is 25, and he's working for Uncle Ed. And Uncle Ed has a construction business. Right now, he works a great deal for Livermore Lab, got a big job out there, and also for Camp Parks. They're doing a lot of remodeling there at the present. And then she has the younger boy, he's 22, and that's, can't think of his name right now, but anyway, he is going to be an apprentice electrician. He's already put in 1 year, so he's very enthused about it, and he's working for Crockett Electric out in Brentwood right now with the houses, and his name is Andrew. And so I'm real pleased that as a widow now, that the boys are so helpful to me. They're always calling, you need this, Grandma? Can I come up and do that, Grandma? So we are a very close family, little but close.
Stella?
Clarence and I have 2 sons. Alan is the oldest. He was here earlier. Lives in our former home up on Summit Drive. Really interested in the history of Pinole and the history of the family, whole family. And he had a machine shop business after he left Veriflow, where he'd worked for over 20 years. And he had a heart attack a couple of years ago and is not able to work yet. But he has a daughter, Amanda, who just turned 22 and just graduated from college. We're real proud of her. She is an ambitious young lady. She just landed a job with Disney in their Burbank headquarters.
Oh, boy.
Has a nice job.
Oh, I should say.
And she was fortunate. She had a friend she went to college with whose mother worked for Disney and has an important job with them and helped her get on. And our younger son, Jim, Alan's 50, Jim is 46, and he's a sergeant with CHP. He lives up in Folsom. He's the one that kind of lured us up there. And he has a wife and 2 children, 12 and 13, Christopher and Jamie. And that's our family.
Ed?
I have 1 daughter, and she works for Kaiser in Walnut Creek. She's a labor and delivery nurse, so we got to get our kids together over there.
I should say.
Yeah, she's in labor and delivery, so if any of you are expecting, see me. She'll get it for you wholesale. and 2 grandchildren, a boy and a girl. As I say, I'm waiting to become a great grandfather, and Julie too. My wife isn't here today. She was born in Italy, so we're an international family.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else we've forgotten that you'd like to talk about?
I'd like to add something. I know that Ed won't brag for himself, but speaking of the wonderful education that the schools here, the school, elementary school, and I think we got great teachers at Richmond High too, there were a lot of people who went on to be very successful, Ed amongst them. He ended up as head of industrial relations for Chevron.
Yeah.
And
that's before all the stock flips. So.
And Harold ended up head of maintenance for Richmond Schools. My own husband ended up with a good job as superintendent of maintenance, handling multi-million-dollar jobs. These were young kids who grew up in this small town with very little. We were poor families. We didn't feel poor because we were all in the same boat.
Exactly.
But it was a rich life, even though we didn't have anything. monetary.
Along those lines, long as she brought it up, I always like to tell this story. There were two people up until, say, 1937. Two people from this town went to Stanford. One was the son of the richest person in town, the Downers, and the other was the son of an immigrant from Norway who didn't have anything at all. And like to say, both of us went to Stanford, and it could happen only in America. So I always like to tell that story because we were the first two from Pinole.
One thing we forgot to mention in the city is every October, it smelled like this was a brewery. Everybody made their own wine.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Including the Swedes.
Oh, yes.
And you can smell the grapes crushed, and then they're fermenting. And my father would put all his barrels filled with wine, and he put a potato on potatoes would blow off and hit the floor. And they were in the basement, and they hit the floor. So like a shotgun went off in the basement. There's one old Italian that lived over in Mary.
Sassoni?
Mr.
Sassoni. That was Mary Kelly's father or grandfather.
Father.
And anyway, he was the smart one, though. He add a little sugar to his, and he'd give him more alcohol. And then the feds finally came in and told me how to put water down his grapes because there was too much alcohol in the wine.
Did everybody grow their own grapes in their yard?
No. My dad used to go, with the connection that we had up in Livingston, as I told you, he got so that he'd get orders down here, and we'd have a car, a freight car come in and down at the depot, and then they'd shell out who got so many boxes of this and who got so many boxes of that. And you want to laugh, when we had the floods, as they're talking about, where we were down at the mouth there, we get flabbergasted with water, It'd come up maybe to the second step. But as we were up on mud sills, the barrels would be floating down. And you could hear them banging, Making 150, another funny thing. He had a wine cellar. We had a big barn that the company left for him to put the cows in, the hay and so forth. And in one corner he had a wine cellar. Well, I don't know where he collected this picture of a train, a pretty good-sized train, and it got a lot of smoke on it. And he'd say, "When I see that train going backwards, I know I've had enough." So that was a laughing joke there.
We had a grape crusher in our basement, too, down on Peach Street. Yeah.
We had the
Everybody made
crusher
wine.
and the press and everything.
Well, all the kids crushed the grapes,
Yeah.
Yeah. And get in
people
with your
had
feet.
purple feet for some time. But that was our job, was to stomp around on those grapes with
They had
bare
athlete's
feet.
feet either.
You remember that, Harold?
Oh, yeah.
Stomping grapes? Yeah. That was a lot of fun. It was cold, but a lot of fun.
One other remembrance I'd just like to bring up, and he and I were arguing about this not long ago. Clarence and I were probably the last delivery men of home delivery milk from the cow to the home. And there was an article in the Contra Costa Times about 2 or 3 years ago saying, I forget the fellow's name now, but you all might remember the article, and saying this person, whoever he was the last of the home delivery milkman. Well, he was younger than I was. And
My age.
Huh?
He was my age.
He was your age, just a kid. And, so
Corella.
anyway, I wrote a letter to Helen Unger, now it used to be Helen DeLacy, and I didn't know that Otto had died. Otto Unger was her husband. Well, he would have been the oldest home delivery milkman from Pinole Valley Dairies, and because he worked for Joe Silva, and they competed with Faria Brothers.
Oh, really?
Then Helen wrote me back less than a year ago, or almost 2 years, I guess now, saying Otto passed away, and I didn't know that. That made me the oldest home delivery milkman in the Pinole area, and he was trying to claim that he was, you see. Well, again, I had to break you into that job. See?
Okay.
No.
Getting back to the Joe Silva, And the Faria brothers had a dairy, and they charged 7 cents a quart. Joe Silva comes along, it's right across the street, and he starts up his dairy, 5 cents a quart. That's when Bill, it was going, and he were fighting out. I'll never forget, Mrs. Silvas was out there waving her arms like she was stopping a freight train, trying to stop them from fighting. She was screaming, but they were enemies for many, many years.
Oh, yeah.
Over 2 cents.
Yeah, over 2 cents.
Over 2 cents.
But that was a lot of money.
Sure.
American competition.
But I never did get any of those bottles.
You didn't have. You were just Powder Works delivery, right?
No. We delivered to just down the street where I live.
Didn't you get delivered to Powder Works?
Oh, I went up there with
Eddie.
Uncle Eddie would deliver in the big cans.
Yeah.
Of course, we had to deliver a
But
can.
the dairy business was being phased out. The big companies were taking over. So we were the last of the Mohicans in the home delivery business. Faria Brothers Dairy. We used to milk the cows, put it in the cooler, strain it, put it in the cooler, and put them in the bottles, and separate the cream when we were selling cream, put the caps on Faria Brother Dairies, and get out in the truck and then deliver.
After take the cream down to the Southern Pacific Railroad station every day.
And Grandpa Faria would bring the skim milk to the pigs.
Yeah, that's right.
We had milk delivery. We had groceries delivered when we were little. And in fact, Mr. Baraka used to come up to Hercules and take orders from everybody, all the women, and then he'd take the orders in the morning, and then we'd get our groceries in the afternoon.
And they didn't charge extra for that.
No.
And even the butcher did the same thing.
Yeah.
Ted Hemlin, what was it, Hemlin and
Smith and Hemlin.
Smith and Hemlin, right?
And we'd all get a hot dog. We'd go in to buy 25 cents worth of stew meat, and we'd always get a hot dog.
Or a dill pickle.
Or a dill pickle.
Out of a big jar.
Yeah, out of a big jar.
Okay, anything else anybody wants to add? Beatrice sent an email, right, to you?
Yeah, that was.
And to close this off, I'm going to read what her input is here, because she's not here, but we'd like to have her input. And she writes, about the old timers meeting, what can I contribute? I can say that growing up in our small town was such a special gift. To be able to really know your neighbors who were always there in time of need, tragedies, or a cup of sugar. Friends always shared their bounty with one another. Oh, the fresh taste of the variety of fruits and vegetables, and yes, an occasional fish that was shared by one who liked to fish off the bay. To have groceries delivered to your back door without any additional charge, to have such great respect, or was it fear, of our teachers, that they were conscious of pleasing them after school hours, weekends included. Behind the walls of where they lived remain a total mystery and curiosity to this day. To have a family doctor who was in your bedroom at any hour of evening and early morning hours when he should be resting and enjoying his family. To have to walk or run up the hill to a great school with great teachers. There were few families with 2 cars, but most of all, mothers were home cleaning and cooking. There were buying a Milky Way bar, a frozen one, was the ultimate, or a Baffle bar or a Uno bar was a real but rare treat. Banana splits were gold, something to save for. Watching a schoolmate walking his dog, never on a leash, sharing the licks with his best friend. Walking to church to worship, always respecting everyone's choice of religion. Anti-Semitism, anti-blacks, anti-Mexican, not heard of or spoken of. No prejudice here. We were America's melting pot in a little town. Parades, sandlot ball, bicycling, walking, running, basketball with homemade hoops at home. We were aware of our parents' financial status. Extras had to be paid for by babysitting, clerking in the local grocery stores and department stores in the neighboring Richmond. Setting hair for neighbors' friends for 25 cents at the most. Paper routes, house cleaning for some of the privileged, in general feeling safe. I'll think of more, but please present my input when you get together.
Now, who wrote that?
Beatrice.
Our sister.
My
That's
sister
great.
Stella.
That's great.
I saved it.
I didn't know she had that talent.
I saved it.
So,
Wrote it to Celeste.
if anybody else has anything else they'd like to get on this tape,
Gosh, when we get home, we'll think of a lot of things.
well, if you do, jot it down and look for your pictures. We'll gladly copy them, scan them, and give them back to you. And hopefully, we are going to be moving the Faria house, and we are going to have a museum to save history of Pinole.
Excellent,
That'd be
excellent.
great.
That's
Just-
excellent.
Just thank you for all of your
Thank you.
thoughts, and I learned a lot.